probably discovered by now. So I'd like to say to everybody who's come this evening, it's a dark October night. Thank you very, very much indeed for turning out. It's been very short notice for people to come. We've only just leafleted the whole of Longlevens, and here we are. It's not a massive turnout, but it's nevertheless dedicated people. It's a very important by-election coming up, really to try and break the Conservative domination on Gloucester City Council, Gloucestershire County Council, and the parliamentary seat, which may be coming from Tewkesbury to Gloucester, we don't know. But more importantly, we want to introduce our excellent candidate here, Daniel Wolfe. Daniel is by far the youngest candidate standing in this election. All the others are of retirement age. He's dynamic, he's enthusiastic, he's educated, he's a professional man, a teacher qualified for 10 years, working at Sir Thomas Rich's School here in Longlevens, which he went to, attended himself. The enthusiasm that I've seen with him over the last few days has impressed me greatly. I'm very, very pleased to recommend him to you as the candidate this evening. I'd also like to apologise on behalf of the Conservative Party, the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrat Party, because all three of their candidates, as you can see from the three empty chairs here, have not bothered to show up this evening, which I find extremely disappointing. This should have been a cross-party debate, and it's not. It's a one-party debate. But nevertheless, I think Daniel's the best candidate, and the best horse in the race, the best candidate here. I truly believe that, and I'm sure when Dan's finished this evening, he'll have convinced you of the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you all for attending. Just to kind of get straight to it, and I guess the question on everyone's lips is, who am I, and what do I stand for, and why should you vote for me? Well, it comes down to, I'll address the first one first of all, and Richard's done a really good kind of intro on that. 32 years old, I am a father of a young daughter who's 5 years old, so all the kind of concerns of having a young family, I can feel those and empathise with those. I've been a teacher for 10 years, as Richard mentioned, and have taught at Thomas Rich's, which was the school that I attended. So, of course, the issue of grammar schools and of education and making sure that you get a balanced mix of education for all different types of children is very, very close to my heart. It's something I've dedicated most of my professional life to. Added on with that, we've had some experience, obviously, with the Conservative Party, so I know the party, I know how they work, and I've seen so far in this campaign just the lengths I think they'll go to try and campaign and try and be a little bit difficult about things. They seem to be worried. You know, the word on the street is we are having more activity here in Longlevens than in a general election. And that says to me that they are concerned. I think they thought this was going to be an easy ride for them, and it's just another example of the kind of complacency and arrogance I think that they demonstrated by not turning up to what was going to be a cross-party debate. I wanted to hear what these other candidates had to say. I wanted to hear what they were about, and unfortunately they've let themselves down by not turning up and doing so. Anyway, so back to the job in hand. Why stand in Longlevens? Why stand in Gloucester? Well, I think we need change. The current council at the minute is what I see as a duopoly. It's run by the Conservatives, Lib Dems also form up with that, and then you've got some of the Labour people involved there too. And that in itself probably wouldn't be a big issue if, in the history of duopolies and monopolies, the reason why they don't exist is because they don't provide choice for people. They don't provide a different way of approaching a problem. They don't provide innovation. What you do get with monopolies is the same old, time after time, with an inability to change or look forward. And that, I think, is what's happening with Gloucester Council at present. Now, I'm a young person, you know, compared to the other candidates who are all of retirement age. I'm a much younger candidate, which affords me, I guess, a few advantages. Number one, much closer to the empathy of the younger populace, and also I'm kind of in the middle. I'm nearly middle age, so I've had some life experience. I've got a young child. I want to get a mortgage sorted out and you know, and do all that. I've had some experience in employment, and I look forward to my retirement and the worries that come along with that at this age. You know, starting to save and whatnot, and thinking about pensions and all those sorts of things. So I'm kind of in the middle. So in terms of being electable, by being in the middle, you're quite close to the younger ones and quite close to the older ones, and therefore a bit more appealable, one hopes. Added to that, technology is something which I think has come out through this election. We're very active on social media, and you've probably already seen that. And it concerns me. When I was first in the council chambers as a prospective Conservative candidate, they said, you know, we had ideas about the campaign, and I said, well, the idea of social media. And everyone went, what? And I just went, well, hold on a second, this is the medium by which most people are getting their information on a near daily basis. It's easy to implement, it's reactive, you can get the feedback in real time, you can see what people are thinking about the things that you're putting out there almost instantly. It lends itself to democracy, true democracy, where people actually get to have their say and are listened to in a timely fashion. So I was puzzled by that. So we've done a bit of a campaign on social media, and I think going forward, that's just one example of how I would bring innovation to the council and how doing business would change and become more progressive and more forward-thinking, and try and take into account all the technology and ways of talking to people and engaging people that you've got, even if it's talking to people here now, asking questions, listening, or if it's social media, or if it's going out and talking to people and canvassing. It doesn't matter. I'm willing to do all of it to try and get the message across, and more importantly, to try and listen to people and engage, which is something I definitely know there's a huge chasm of apathy in this city and across the nation, really, with politics, with politicians. They're not engaging, they're not listening. What they are doing is not in the interest of the people. So what it comes down to is this. There are 2 Conservative councillors already in Long Levens. I would market myself as a 3rd councillor to hold the other people to account, to make sure that the council at large is run properly, and that all avenues are looked at, all solutions to a problem are looked at, not just the easiest one or the one that's most cosy for those who make that decision. So, added to that, I have no problem asking tough questions. I've got no problem sticking my head above the parapet, even if it does get shot off, because I think you need to have people that are brave enough and willing enough to stand and hold their hand up and say, look, I don't think this is correct. Is there another way of doing it? Now, in good, proper democracy, which I guess I experienced really off the back of the referendum, was a Conservative campaign with lots of people, cross-party. We were all united in trying to push forward, I guess, the idea of leaving the EU. And that showed me that it can be done, that you can work in collaboration with people who've got a different view from yours. As long as you're respectful and you're decent and you're trying to collaborate and cooperate, it can be done. If you put aside your differences for the greater good, then you can actually make things happen. 58.5% in Gloucester made national news, etc., etc., etc. So what that showed me is that if it can be done at that level, why can't it be done at higher echelons of government? Why can't it be done at council level? Why can't it be done at national level? Why can't we just say, look, hold on a second, you've got a really good idea, I like it, I don't like these bits. Here's an alternative. And then people discuss things. Yeah? And we're not worried about, well, you're from the left and you're from the right and you wear a purple tie and you wear a red tie. Yeah, ultimately, I'm looking forward to working with all people from all parties on the council to get things done for Gloucester City, to get things done in Long Levens. So the challenge of being maybe the only UKIP councillor, well, not maybe, being the only UKIP councillor on the City Council, I accept gladly if the people do indeed elect me to that office, because I think it needs someone to be different to get change. If you have the same types of people in the same kind of establishment, always coming in, then all you get is the same thing, and I think people have had enough of it.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions anybody's got that they'd like to ask? Anybody live in Long Levens? Or no? No questions at all? Anyone?
Yeah, what's your primary concern in terms of what needs doing in this particular part of the city? You know, what do you see as the major priority?
Okay, it's a very good question. I think there are several. It's split really between the impact that's going to be caused. I think the university and their proposed expansion is a very big issue for people here, because it's not just the university and the fact that we want to expand the university and grow that for the greater good of the city. We need to do that in a way which is done with the consent and with the discourse and the discussion of local residents, which, from what I'm hearing, is just not happening. They are riding roughshod. They do not want to listen whatsoever. So I think, first of all, we have to open those doors and make sure there's proper dialogue. Second of all, related with that, you've got the problems of congestion, problems of parking, the problems of traffic that come with that, which will affect all the residents in this area, because wherever you have the problem, if you put one solution in one place, it'll just displace that problem somewhere else. So we need to think about that rationally. Do I have any particular solution right now? I don't have all the facts to hand, but I would start by saying, so far there is not any joined up communication between the residents, between the current council, and between the university. When residents want to make an issue of something, they're told by the councillors to speak to the university. The university says go speak to the councillors, nothing happens. So that needs to change fundamentally. That I think is a huge issue going forward. One of the other issues linked to that, again, is traffic and congestion. But as you've seen, more recently I've been talking about issues such as knife crime, antisocial behaviour, the fact that you've got all these little kind of these NO2 canisters for all the laughing gas, you know, cropping up around the place. So that's an issue, and that's something which I guess I've had some experience talking about, you know, antisocial behaviour in the city and knife crime as well. So those two, I think, of joint importance. One is something that's happening now. One is something which will be happening in the future, so slightly different reasons, but yes, very important.
What are your views in terms of the way the direction of the city is going from the main city centre towards the dock areas?
That's another good question there. I think it's fantastic what's been done at the docks. It's fantastic the impact that's had in terms of bringing the rugby down and you know, all that other stuff. It's good, it's really good, and it's rejuvenated the city. I think the issue is that we now need the same parallel investment in the city centre. We've got an historic city centre. When it's done up really well and it's got all the flowers up and the Christmas lights, all the, you know, it can look fantastic. But we need the investment to maintain it. If we can do that, if we clean up the streets, if we can make sure that we haven't got empty shops, we can make sure that we have shops that are interesting and independent and unique, so they're different to the sort of designer outlets that you get, then people will come. And if people come, they spend money. And when they spend money, that creates jobs. And that gives people more money to then go and spend, and so on and so on. So you get an upward spiral, which ultimately leaves Gloucester City being vibrant, full of people, a nice place to go, exciting, and pretty much, you know, a very different place to kind of how it is at the minute.
Okay, anybody else? Gentleman there?
Yeah, Rich, thanks. Susanna might throw something at me for stealing her thunder now, but flooding is a hugely hot topic in this world. Having campaigned here before, I know that. What are your views on how we can improve that situation?
Okay, the issue of flooding, I think, fundamentally comes down to, well, why are you trying to, you know, I'd ask the question, why are you trying to build more homes? And I think we know an answer in part to that, because there's money in it, and that's great for the council. Number two, if you are going to build the homes, we already know that building on floodplains probably isn't a good idea, so is it worth looking at other sites as an alternative? So that would be my first kind of point of that. I know there are new homes that are due to be built. I know that the brook that kind of runs along Brion Way is an issue and has been an issue in the past historically. So to build more homes and not know where the water's going to be displaced to, you know, I think the answer of, oh, it will find its natural course, that's not really good enough. You know, a flood is water finding its natural course, isn't it? So that's not a good enough suggestion. Also, I think to say, well, look, we're building the homes, you know, we're going to elevate them a couple of feet. Well, that's great for those homes. What about everyone else? So I think the issue is, do we, you know, it's a Gloucester-wide issue. We need to find places to put these homes. I would like to see more of the brownfield sites, the inner city, be regenerated preferentially before we start, you know, encroaching on greenfield land, which has its own issues. It's a no-brainer for me. Don't go there unless you absolutely have to, would be my solution to the problem. Not to avoid it, just to say that actually, why make an issue when you don't need to? Find another solution in the city which accommodates people, doesn't annoy the residents that are already here, maintains that we can get growth in the city, because we do need more houses for new people, and avoids the issue of flooding.
Any more questions for anybody at all?
What's your views on public transport? We've got the worst bus service in the whole of the city. Most bus services now every 10-15 minutes, ours every half hour. At night there's 2. On a Sunday it's an hour. All this university expansion, everybody's going to catch buses and all that. It just doesn't happen. It's getting to the point now the buses are so crowded, it's not a financially viable route because there's a lot of elderly people involved in on Levens. You get young children, babies and pushchairs and prams. You get elderly people and disabled, the most vulnerable group of people, and they're being left stranded. Once those 4 places are taken up, with a pushchair, a wheelchair, or even just a trolley, a shopping trolley, you can't access the buzz. We've been promised time and time again that you will get more buzzes, building the houses. It's just not materialised. And if anything, the buzzes are being cut. They've cut some of our buzzes, the early morning buzzes, and we're being left stranded. You can make a journey out and not be able to come back. You wait half hour for the next bus. There's no guarantee you get on that next bus. There's no adequate bus shelters or no bus shelters at all. It's just getting worse. They've invested in a bus shelter, in a bus station, and yet Stagecoach are cutting as more of these youngsters are shopping online. The decline of the shopping centres, they're not going into the towns, you know, becoming ghost towns in that. It's only the older people that's supporting it. And yet we're having a new bus station. I just feel that would be a magnet for antisocial behaviour. I sooner see some inner city housing in the city to regenerate the city and take away the, you know, the congestion of getting into the town. And they could easily do what they've done in Stroud and in Cheltenham. They've got it in Clarence Street, Worcester Street. If they widened the road, it would take the 18 bus stops. You've got 18 services going through, the Forest services and the Cheltenham and Chixby buses.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's...
The buses are just being cut and cut and cut, and you're around a new bus station.
That's a really, I mean, it's a paradox in a way, because looking at the main routes that you have here, Long Evans is an extremely well-connected place to be, in theory, because you can go to Cheltenham, you can go to Gloucester, you can go, you know, and it's on the main conduit. I guess the reality is, if you've got a bus service which is only really pandering towards the, you've got the 94U, this university service, so it's great, you know, for people that's explicit using that. But yeah, if you have a ward which has a particular demographic which needs a service that better caters to that demographic, it would make sense to put more buses on that certain route. Now, I know there's been the promise of this. The question would be to keep them under pressure, I think.
I write constantly to the Stagecoach, to the MPs, to the councillors, and it's also the design of the buses now. It's more and more people are being kept alive and are more able, because you've got these walking aids and the technology and the improved health and the drugs, and are more being encouraged to be active in that. It's the type of the bus. They don't even look at the design of the bus anymore. You know, the bus is not fit for purpose. It could be half empty, but if you've got 4 people, I've seen 3 people been left at a bus stop because they've either got a pushchair, a mobility walking aid, or a wheelchair, and the bus is half empty, but they cannot accommodate those people. We're now being given the 94 gold buses. There's no storage even if you try and fold your buggy up. I've tried to fold a buggy up, and the driver has turned his engine off and thrown me off the bus. Because he's saying it's illegal, you can't safely store it, and yet they've clearly got a notice saying that you can store it elsewhere. And he's turned his engine off and has refused to go.
Well, I think that was obviously a faux pas on Stagecoach's part, but to come back to the point that you make, I mean, to get redesigned buses and whatnot is, it's a national concern. It's one that I'd be happy to raise as a councillor and say, look, we're having this situation. You need to do something about it, because if it's not just happening here, it's a genuine there. I'm sure there are suburbs up and down the UK where this is exactly a similar issue, that you've not got the transport which should be there to cater for the demographic which is in that ward. The issue, I think, generally of transport, you can't just necessarily solve everything by throwing more buses at it, because equally, if it's a non-viable route, then from a profitability point of view, Stagecoach is going to look at it and go, hold on a second, we're not making any money on that route, we're not going to run it. So there's also the profit motive there. What they need to do really is be urged by the City Council to say, well, hold on a second, if there are routes that you can service that can generate revenue, fine, maximise those, and use if you've got to run the route at a subsidy, then run a route at a subsidy.
This is how it should be, because there must be other routes that are profitable.
Indeed, and I think that would be the realistic solution to the problem, because if you want more buses, it's going to be a funding issue. I think the current response that you've got from the council is probably down to the fact that they don't want to put their hand in their pocket, and they'd much rather spend the money on other things like a new roundabout, which doesn't really need doing up. That roundabout, by the way, the Elbridge Court roundabout, is only ever, not the Elbridge Court, the Elbridge roundabout is only ever an issue when they're doing roadworks on it. If they just left it alone, it would be all right. What have they done to it? I think they've widened one lane and they've put a lane through the middle, this donut business, and I'm just thinking, hold on, that in itself is odd. But coming back to buses, yeah, I think the realistic solution is to say, look, citywide, where do you make revenue from? can we work together as a council to say, look, these are places, not just Long Levens, but there are other routes, I'm sure, that need looking at and need to become tailored and made more bespoke to the people that actually live there. And then what Stagecoach would find is they make a lot more money. Those routes would become profitable, and therefore we've got the motive for them to keep doing it. So I think it's about getting them to buy into it, and not the council going, oh yeah, well, we'll do something about it, not doing anything about it, you're writing letters, they're just probably disregarding them point blank, because they know they're not going to realistically do anything about it.
Well, Lawrence Robinson, that was one of his points for standing, was to improve the bus service, because I've raised it so many times with him, and he assumed that these 3,000 houses are going to build. Obviously it's going slower than he thought, so obviously the houses would perhaps generate, but of course it's the wrong type of houses, it's all 4 or 5 bedroom executive houses, they're all working. They're building houses for people to commute to Malvern and Worcester. There's no jobs being created in Gloucester.
Well, what you've also got with the ward, you're absolutely right in there in what you say. What you've got with this particular ward, if you look at it, is, and I've done a video on the kind of the congestion and the parking issues that are around here. It's bounded by 4 major roundabouts. And a bypass on one side, so there's a lot of traffic going around here, and it's not just internal city traffic. It's people travelling through. You know, they're trying to get from A to B. They don't really care where they are. They're just trying to get on their journey. So you know, you look at some of the other roundabouts. The Elbridge Court one, for example, is the most congested roundabout in the county. It's the most congested roundabout in the county, up to 20,000 cars a day. Right, that is insane. Now, that's on one end of it. Then you've got the next roundabout where you've got the Tewkesbury Road roundabout. That's another one which is busy. Then you've got the bypass roundabout, and then you've got our good old friend there with the A40 kind of at the top. So the whole place is bounded by A roads and roundabouts. That causes a problem. I think what needs to be done is if you can have parallel transit, so if you can suggest that there's a route out from the city which goes down Tewkesbury Road, rather than forcing everything down Cheltenham Road, that would be a way to reduce some of the congestion, some of the safety issues, provide an alternative route which will maybe discriminate between people that want to go that way to a place because they might have mates down that neck of the woods, you know, do a journey and get to Cheltenham that way rather than just going down the same route. So I think there are alternatives, but I think the problem comes back to you have a stagnant council that doesn't want to look at anything other than the plans they've already ever seen.
My solution would be parking rights, north, west, south and east. Not just a mile out. I mean, the parking right at Elbridge Court, they don't realise, like, when the rugby's on, people's going to go across all the way through Gloucester, through all the major spine roads, into Gloucester, to go out to Gloucester, to catch a bus back in, because, you know, it'll be cheaper. Yeah. But it needs to serve that particular area to stop them coming in and using these main spine roads of Barnwood Road and Tewkesbury Road and Cheltenham Road.
A very good point. Just one last, there's a gentleman here who's got a question, but one point is, Elmbridge Road roundabout they're spending £9 million on, and you've got military veterans sleeping on the streets of Gloucester, which is amazing. Yeah. And of course, this is under the Tewkesbury MP at the moment, so he's not that keen on looking after it. But the other thing is, Elmbridge Road roundabout's going to be closed at 8 o'clock tonight, believe it or not, so you have to find another way home if you came back towards Cheltenham. Gentleman over there.
You've talked about improving bus services, presumably by offering subsidies to Stagecoach. You've talked about improving roads. Where do you draw the line between spending money and taking the money in council tax from the ratepayers?
Okay, yeah, again, a very good, you can't create money, well, you can create money, but then it gets devalued, something the Bank of England hasn't really realised yet, but anyway. Yeah, really fair point, you can't just make things happen without funding, and the funding needs to be thought of. I think what needs to happen is that we need to be a bit more savvy on the council. If elected, every project, obviously, economics is about resource allocation. What have you got, what do you want to do? If you do one thing, it means you probably can't do something else. Some of you might know that's something called economic cost or something. It's not just what you can do, it's the cost of what you can't do, which is really important in local politics. So I think the trick is to say, well, you know, obviously you've got to look at various funding as a case-by-case basis, but you need to then step back and look at the overview. And I think what happens with the council now is they get into a project, they look at it, and they go, oh, that's brilliant. Yeah, fantastic. They do a budget for it, it's lovely. And then only when they sit back and go, oh, it's like, what's the impact on the rest of our budget and the other things we're trying to do? Then they realise they've got a bit of a problem. Then they realise we're going to cut back on services because we've got other things that we said we were going to do, which look all glitzy and lovely, and we can show those off, and that's fantastic. And people will forget about this other stuff that we were actually elected to sort out. So I guess the question, I mean, I don't know where all the money's being wasted. I'm sure there's a lot of fat on the cow that needs trimming. That would be the first thing, and being smart about it, getting bang for your buck. There's lots of ways that you can make the money that you have work better for you. There's lots of ways that you can save money by not spending on city projects. There's lots of ways that you can actually invest in projects which become self-sustaining to a point, or you do them in such a way that, yes, they need a sunk cost, but then they become viable, and then actually they generate revenue back, which you can then deploy somewhere else. I know I sound very generic, but without being in the council at this particular stage and know exactly all the projects that are going on, I can't give you a specific answer. However, I do think that there's no need for council tax to have to rise. I personally think actually if it's done correctly, what you could do is actually see a slight cut, which I think would be to the benefit, and show that you can do efficiency. That you can say that, hold on a second, we've given you more things for less money, and we're going to reduce your council tax. Now, as a councillor, if one was elected and could demonstrate and prove and actually bring that to bear, that's a very strong platform to then campaign upon going forward. So my agenda would be to show that it can be done, because it can. You've just got to take tough calls, you've got to take no nonsense, you've got to make sure that people are working for the interests of the city and not necessarily any other conflicts of interest they may have or may not have. And you need transparency. And I think if you can get all those things, then you've got a chance. What I represent, I don't for 1 minute think that I embody all of those things, but I want to push others to try and move in that direction. And that's where I come in.
It's probably not de rigueur, but I've got 2 questions from the chair, so I hope nobody has any objections to that. I'll just say them both. One is, as the father of 2 young people, I'm very concerned about the rise of knife crime in Gloucester in particular. In Long Levens itself, a small suburb like this, not even 2 weeks ago, it was a week last Saturday, 2 young ladies were stabbed just near St Thomas Rich's School. So I'd like to know your thoughts about knife crime and policing in Gloucester, and in Long Levens, of course, being part of Gloucester. The second thing is, when I've been campaigning here in Long Levens with you, what's come to me is the concerns people have got about the grammar schools in Long Levens, in particular St Thomas Rich's, the fact that children here locally are being displaced from grammar schools for kids coming from, say, the Forest of Dean, because there are no grammar schools there, or from Tewkesbury or wherever else. So, do you believe in the grammar school system? Do you think that grammar schools should be built in the Forest of Dean, in Tewkesbury, so that Gloucester kids, Long Levens kids, are not being displaced in that fashion?
Right, I will deal with the first question, that of knife crime, which has happened. It's been a problem for the city for quite some time now, actually, and the fact that it's even begins to spring up in awards such as this is a big concern, massive concern. I think the issue is one of the resources of the police. The police themselves do a very, very, very difficult job. They are putting themselves on the line for our safety. That's number one. But they're overstretched, they're underfunded, they're not deployed correctly. And it comes back to your earlier question. That's one of the resources which I think is paramount to make sure you spend money on. Don't worry about redoing up roundabouts. Make sure there are coppers on the street doing their job. So I think that's what needs to happen. As I mentioned on a previous video that was done, I have it on pretty good understanding that there are very few patrol cars that go around the county at any given time on patrol. You've got cars that will respond, but actually on general patrol, I think there's only 4 for the whole county, which is, it's not nowhere near enough, not by a long stretch. So that needs to be addressed. I think, moving to have the police commissioners, I think that's a good move. The fact they're independent, they can work hopefully better with the city and the county councils to get stuff done. But the issue of knife crime, it needs to be tackled in a collaborative approach. It's a multifactorial issue. You can't just go, all right, we're going to make sure there's more coppers to catch the people once it's happened. It's a bit too late for that. So you need to kind of challenge what are the causes. And you can't just, unfortunately, label stuff and go, oh, it's gang related, or it's drug related, because it's not always the case. Sometimes you need to look at each case on its own merits. Sometimes there might be, could be racial tensions, it could be anything. So you need to look at each case on its merit and not just sort of be glib and kind of gloss over it. I think the main thing, to counter it, prevention is always better than cure. And one of the things we need to look at is if you look at the stats and you find that actually a lot of these things are happening maybe with younger individuals and so on, then you have to say, well, what could they be doing other than being out and about? could be given things to do? Are there skills they can learn? Are there facilities for them available to improve themselves rather than do what they are doing, which is sort of maybe hanging around, being antisocial and so on? That's not to say that all young people are like that at all. There are some very good, responsible young people, particularly in awards such as this. But what we need to do is to educate people. We need to get in there to provide them with alternatives. We need to I'm stalling because it almost sounds like, yeah, that's just one issue to the problem. Whatever the issue is, we need to keep an open mind and work with all the people available, community groups, community leaders, the police and so on. What's happening now is we're not getting a lot of joined up thinking with anything, and if the left hand and the right hand don't know what each other's doing, nothing happens. So that would be my first point. And just while I say that, you know, there are leaders out there, there are people that are working incredibly hard, groups like Increase the Peace that do a tremendous amount of work. They're going into schools, they've got a separate program with people that know what they're talking about, and it really is, you know, waking kids up to kind of be safe and be aware of knife crime, and also to try and reduce those thinking of maybe perpetrating it, because you know, there will be consequences. So that's your first question. Your second question, I think grammar schools, probably an easier one to answer, something very close to my heart, for many reasons. Now, not everyone knows this, but I worked at St Thomas Ritchie's for 7 years, having been there as a student for 7 years, and then decided I elected to then go to Gloucester Academy, which at the time was probably what most people would consider the opposite, complete end of the spectrum in terms of, you know, standards and what was going on with the school. And the reason to do that was quite personal. It was because, well, hold on, these guys over here, they have the benefit and privilege of really, really, you know, highly competent teachers that have been, you know, really, really drilled through the process and so on. I think, you know, it's not to discredit anything that was going on at Gloucester Academy, but I was actively recruited by John Riley, the then headmaster, to come there as a high caliber teacher to try and help drive standards up, and I wanted to do that so that the disadvantaged people in Gloucester from a socio-economic background that wasn't favourable necessarily for grammar school would still get good quality teaching. That's still my stance. I think you need to have grammar schools, but alongside that you need to have probably an even more selective system. And what I mean by that is that everyone in this room is different, right? No two human brains are the same. So how can you expect to get the maximum result if you shoehorn kids through exactly the same educational experience? It's not going to work. If you had a doctor that prescribed the same medicine and the same dosage to every one of its patients, yeah, irrespective of what the illness was, there'd be a lot of dead people. It's not a good way of doing things. So education needs to become more bespoke. What I mean by that is, if you're smart, you end up going to grammar schools. Yeah? If you're very creative, then you end up going to your creative schools and the arts and so on. If you're very good with your hands, for example, you start getting exposed to some of those industries, techniques, skills, trades, professions, whatever you want to call them, which you have got a natural ability in, therefore probably likely to be more successful at doing, and therefore you're more likely to apply yourself. I see education, the actual word education comes from the Latin educate, which means to lead out from. So the job of an educator is to get the most out of people. Yeah? So if people can find out what they're good at, be trained in how to make a living from doing something they enjoy, they're much more likely to apply themselves, see it through, and end up having really, really good life chances, good life goals, and a good life, which is what we all want. How they get there is different. But the job of education is to provide the routes to enable people to take that journey should they want to. They might not want to, that's fine, that's their choice. But just to say, right, grammar schools, comprehensive, that's it, one system, one curriculum, bang, it's foolish. It's foolish. What it doesn't do is say, actually, if you look at a successful company or a successful ecosystem or anything really where you've got a big organisation with different components in it, it works best when you specialise. Someone has a particular job to do, they get very good at it, it's the job they like doing. You know, they have a natural innate ability at that job, they do it. Someone else has a different job to do and does that and so on. Now if you can link those all together and you can have equal respect for the jobs that everybody does, then you're going to have a very prosperous system, prosperous society, prosperous organisation, whatever it is. So you need to get people that are different to then be able to work together. And you need to celebrate people's differences in education rather than trying to force everyone through this one-size-fits-all, let's get 50% of people off to university because that's a good idea. Doesn't work.
Can I just add to the fact that Richard said that Long Leven's children are missing out, they can't go to grammar school because they're taking from the forest and that. It's also the same for those that don't go to grammar school. Their port of call at the moment is Churchstone or Chosen. They're taking more and more from Cheltenham. They're having to widen their catchment area. So they're not even getting into places. You know, we lost Long Leven's secondary modern school. Oxtal, you know, the school, it's more modern than the school I went to. I went to a school, a Victorian school with outside toilets. You know, it's not the school that failed, the building, the fabric of the building, it's the system that's failed. It was an ideal to be a school again, because, you know, we've now got children in Long Levens, can't even get into Churchstone and Chosen, having to go to the Forest of Dean and Tewkesbury, getting up at 5 in the morning, it's a long day, they're zombies, they're coming home and they've got homework.
And the cost of it.
Well, there's
the cost of it, and the transport, what do you do when the child's sick and the parents are at work and they're down in Tewkesbury or wherever?
really, I meant to get back to this. It's a large question. There are two parts to it. But no, you're absolutely right. I mean, that issue's felt, you know, both ways around. So you can have kids coming in, being bussed in. If they are coming in from elsewhere, then it's unfair on them because they're coming into school, they're unproductive, they have no real enjoyment of all the extracurricular activities because they can't access them. So it's not fair on them or their parents to have the cost and do so. So I'd love to see the proposal of Richard Leppington to actually debate this and really ultimately say, look, we want more grammar schools, we want more schools full stop, but think about the mix, think about what they teach, and think about how you're going to, you know, go forward and make sure that you meet the demand in the locality where it's based, rather than, you know, putting it all on one place because it happens to be a nexus. We did see it with Tommy Richards when we had the crash, when we had the financial crash. What happened was a lot of people couldn't then afford the fees at the private schools, so tried to push everyone through into Tommy's and places like that. And we've got, I think Tommy's is about 60 to 65% Cheltenham kids. So Crip, the other school which I've taught at, it's the true boys' grammar school for Gloucester because it does, you know, take in a much a catchment area, a higher proportion of its pupils from its own city. So it is a big problem. How do we counter it? I think we do need more schools, absolutely. Can you solve the problem of education just by building new shiny buildings? No, you can't. I worked in one of those. It cost them 30 million in the first year, 16 million for the building, 14 million for the staff budget, and it wasn't thought out correctly. It wasn't planned out correctly. The one person they had to do the job, they didn't give them enough chance to do the job, and it didn't work out so well. I hear things are different now, but that is 7 years worth of kids now from moving from Bishop's College to then merging up there and forming the new building. That's 7 years worth of kids. That's a whole educational experience basically from year 7 all the way to sixth form. Ruined. Can't get it back. And unfortunately these kids now, with the way the job market is, the fact that they've been underskilled by the educational system, what else are they going to do? You know, they've got to live. So unless they're going to go on the dole, which some of them will do, or unless they're going to try and take a little job here, there and everywhere, the alternative looks like crime, unfortunately, and that's where the problem comes. You know, a lot of the problems that we see in Gloucester, they were beginning to see in Long Levens even, you know, some of the problems that you get in the city centre are born of the fact that people need to be socially mobile. How do you make people socially mobile? Education. Is grammar school the way forward? No, it isn't. It's part of the mix, and you need to get that mix right, and that mix will be different for each different city in the country. Good thing about UKIP is, as a party, is it looks at that. It doesn't have a whipping system at local level, which means that as a candidate, or as a prospective councillor, if a view to do something for Gloucester would work for Gloucester, but wouldn't necessarily work anywhere else, you can still hold that view and put that view forward without anyone else in the party saying, oh, no, that's not how we do it over here, you know, you've got to toe the line. Actually, you do what's right for the people that you represent.
Okay, check on the front here.
Daniel, when you're elected, obviously you talked about use of social media and appealing to younger generation, and clearly it's been demonstrated that the traditional formats of pen and paper writing to the council isn't getting the correct message through. So how would you go about appealing to the older constituents who are perhaps more well represented by the other parties?
Very, very fair question. I think the social media side of things, that's another kettle of fish. I mean, if elected, that's a whole other way of doing business, which I think would be beneficial to all people. You know, whether you're young or older, it doesn't really matter if you access the internet, which most people do in some way, shape or form. That's a good way to go. In terms of trying to maintain a dialogue and make sure that other people that use other methods and forms of communication are heard as well. We know the techniques, we know we can listen. It just takes someone to sit there and do the casework and to be at the end of the phone and to actually call back or go around to someone's house and actually speak to them. A lot of the people that we're talking about in the current council, they can't even turn up to an open debate to talk to people, let alone probably pick up a phone or read a letter or send an email. I mean, Linda Castle's leaflet that she put out didn't even have any contact details on it. So how could anyone ask her a question about her policies? Yeah, the Lib Dem candidate. So, you know, there's no dialogue here. So in order to the question, yeah, I'd, you know, give me a ring. I'm on the other end of the phone. I'll come around. I'll say hello and see what the issue is. Or hold a meeting. I'll come down to that. Or if it's an issue, you know, at church, or if you want to come to us, it doesn't matter. I'm free. I'm available. I'm energized. I've got the time. If I haven't, I'll make it, or I'll send someone else to come down to speak with you, and then I'll speak with you myself. It doesn't matter because I care. The other people here, they're arrogant, they're complacent, they think they're just going to get the job because they've always got the job without having really worked for it. And that's where this election is different. And if elected, I don't just want to stop now. I'm going to keep on pushing and pushing and pushing because the people of Long Levens, the people of Gloucester deserve better. And I think I can deliver it.
Thanks, folks. I think you can see Dan is a really energetic character. He's won me out the last few days. I'm really looking forward to him making history in Gloucester and being the very first UKIP representative to be elected in the city of Gloucester. That would be a national news story, a major achievement. Only you can change that. So please vote for him. Don't vote for just another Tory. It's between him and the Conservative. And the quality of, Daniel just said, the quality of the leaflet that the Conservatives have sent round tells me they just take it for granted. It's the same leaflet they did in May, but with the names changed. We've made a big effort here. He'll certainly stir things up on the City Council for all the residents of Long Levens, and he'll be a great representative of this area. So thank you very much. A large round of applause for Daniel.